The auto industry may just be facing its worst crisis since the COVID-19 pandemic. And remember, this is an industry that has weathered a slowdown, a massive shortage of semiconductors, and now is wondering what the Russia-Ukraine conflict means for it. Now, the trigger for this discussion, of course, is fresh numbers which came from FADA today, which showed a 9% drop year-on-year in the industry in automobile sales, but the sharp cuts continue for segments like two-wheelers, passenger vehicles, as well as tractors. To get a sense of what really is happening in the industry, I'm joined now by Vinkesh Gulati, President of FADA. Vinnie Mehta, Director General at ACMA, joins us today on the show. Hormazd Sorabjee, Editor of Autocar India, is speaking with us. And I also am joined by Rajeev Singh, Partner and Automotive Leader at Deloitte India. Welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for speaking with us today on the India Development Debate. Mr. Gulati, let me begin with your overview. The numbers that FADA has put out, of course, are on our screen today, and the biggest hit has been in the tractor segment. But with this, FADA has also put out an outlook on the sector, which you have mentioned as negative, gone from neutral to negative because of the conflict going on between Russia and Ukraine. Can you explain to us why?
So thanks, Tamanna, for having me on the show. No doubt, the overall situation is not as good, and the numbers also replicate that. But frankly, we were looking at things easing off. So if you see, the negative percentage is improving. So last month, it was around some 15%. Today, this month, we have done some 10%. So we were expecting that slowly, steadily, we'll be back to normal. But seeing the conflict of Russia, Ukraine, and the increasing crude oil prices are both the reasons where our outlook has changed from neutral to negative. Because due to this conflict, we are expecting there'll be some issue of semiconductor shortages increasing, some issue of commodity problems coming in. And obviously, with the crude price, no doubt we have been lucky for the past 1.5 years because of election, so that the price increase we haven't gone through. But 10th March, results will be out, and the crude is already rushed. I feel today the price is around 114 per barrel, and that's huge. So a big jump of price will happen. I'm hoping it is staggered, not one day. And obviously, it will affect the market on the ground. And the report clearly shows the entry segment as the major problem area. It may be two-wheeler, it may be car. The lower middle class or the rural India or the tier 4, tier 3 towns are where the major distress is, and which is very clear. So any jump in fuel prices, which is out of hand, will affect more the industry. So that is why the outlook being negative as shared.
So the fuel prices, and there's a report today which says there's about a 12 rupee gap between what the fuel prices should be at a retail level and what they are right now. If, the current jump in crude was to be taken into consideration, it's very unlikely that any government will increase fuel prices by 12%, 12 rupees together. They might give subsidies, etc., but that remains to be seen. Hormazd, do you think that fuel prices edging up will be the big dampener on demand? Because that's been happening for a while. We've been living with 100 rupees plus on petrol, diesel for some time. Is the actual problem just the fact that demand has not come back to where it was?
I think definitely fuel prices is going to hit demand quite a bit. I mean, some people are even talking about 130, 140 rupees per litre, which is just makes, running a vehicle almost unaffordable for a large section of motorists, even two-wheelers. So that definitely is going to be a big hit. But, I'm just seeing the way we are also in this very kind of a difficult situation of a transition, which has started very late over here, of going slowly towards electric. So what we are seeing is, even when you look at the manufacturers, there's what I call a very thinning of the model range. I mean, you take Ford, for example. Ford, I mean, if I remember, about maybe 7,000, 8,000 cars a month, they've just gone in one shot. Now, that can't be replaced. It's not going to be replaced one-to-one. We've got certain models within manufacturers' range which are being discontinued because of regulations, be it emissions or CAFE. So you've got all these issues happening where it's becoming more and more difficult for IC engines to be compliant, and it's cheaper for the manufacturers, to kind of just knock certain, variants out of their mix and put their investment money on just a few key models over there. So I think consumer net is having much less choice as well. You've seen the bottom end of the market, which is really controlled by Maruti. The lower end, again, is very, very weak. Again, it kind of reflects what's happening in the two-wheeler segment. So really, the entry-level segment also has taken a hit. What's really holding up are the SUVs and that segment. But I don't think it's enough to kind of, compensate for the losses we are seeing in just the kind of what I call the thinning of the model range. And, just to wrap this part off, I mean, we were doing our Car of the Year judging. The year before, we had about 28 cars. This year, we had just 19 new models. So that kind of tells you that even the launch of models has become far and few between. And finally, it's choice that really drives the market. And I don't think we're having any choice. In fact, if anything, choice is becoming less.
Okay, so interesting perspective. Hormazd thinks it's also the fact that choices are now more limited relatively, which could be a dampener on demand. Vinnie Mehta, I want you to explain to us from your point of view what the outlook is looking at. I mean, there are a couple of factors. The overall industry going through a bit of, sort of a difficult period. The transition to EVs, which actually speaking, petrol at 130, if it happens, Hormazd, I hope it doesn't, is going to be the biggest advertisement ever to push for an EV. The premium and everything included. I mean, what could be a better reason to push for EV? So what is the outlook looking like for your sector?
So thank you, Tamanna, for having me. I wish I knew what the outlook would be. It's still very, very fluid. The industry anyways has been facing headwinds, which are very well known. You have challenges on availability of chips. You still have availability on logistics, on containers. The raw material prices are continuing to rise, and this conflict is made it even worse. So the situation remains, and of course we all talked about the increasing fuel prices that impacts the market. The offtake of vehicles or even uptake, and as FADA has come up now, and they've also revised the outlook, as they said, to negative. So in this milieu, it's very difficult to say what it would be, but I would say it's still a wait and watch situation. But I would also say that, it's quite a bit better than what it was when the second wave came in, okay? And considering the fact that the demand is there, especially when it comes to the passenger vehicles, there is hope. Commercial vehicle seems to be doing good, but of course they're coming on back of 3 bad years, but at least they're coming back strongly. That's also very, very good. Two-wheelers is definitely a concern, and something needs to be done about it. And therefore, on back of it, I would say that the component industry this year, at least for till March, will be okay. But again, it really depends upon how the entire vehicle industry sort of performs for next year. It's still wait and watch. And exports were coming in very, very strongly. Now, again, with the war, I do not know how Europe gets impacted and how their industry gets impacted, because Europe is a very important market for us. 30% of our foreign export goes to Europe. So again, keeping fingers crossed. And as I say, I mean, I just hope and I wish that the war ends sooner than we would want it to be.
Absolutely. Mr. Mehta, just a little bit more about the export market getting hit and the impact of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. So you talked about how Europe is a key market. Give us some perspective on how large a part do these two countries play, Russia and Ukraine by themselves. And in terms of supply chain chokes that we were seeing over the last few months, do you expect that to worsen?
Well, so let me take one by one. So both Russia and Ukraine aren't very big direct markets for us.
Right.
Okay, I understand that there are distributors out of Germany and out of Italy who supply India-made products into these two markets, but that's not very, very big. But again, these two markets or these two economies with the huge raw material reserves that they have, they would impact the entire European economies very much, and therefore also would have a play in the global economy, also in the supply chain. First, of course, we've talked about crude. These two markets are very big reserves of natural gas, or these economies are reserves of natural gas. So therefore, energy and cost of energy is going to be a challenge. Already, we've discussed the prices of petrol in India is going up. You mentioned that. Also, there are certain precious metals such as the rhodium, palladium, all these are coming from there. These would impact semiconductor manufacturing, but also just the mere announcement of the war 3 or 4 days ago, the aluminum prices started to grow up.
Yep.
Steel prices are going up, and they produce nickel that goes into steel alloy. They do produce neon, which goes into semiconductor manufacturing. But I would say that these are all commodities or raw materials. And I think it takes a wee bit of time because there is already some amount in the supply chain. That's what I'm saying, that if the war ends quickly, then probably these would be transients. Okay, but if it's a prolonged war, then boy, we have a tough time ahead.
Yep. We're just beginning to see the impact of what has started a huge world event 8 days ago. And of course, everyone hopes it wraps up quickly. Rajeev Singh, in your view, I want to understand, because of course the war is the latest trigger, which is making all sectors, all industries, all nations nervous about what comes next. I want to understand if we have really seen a robust recovery in demand post-second wave, as was being expected, because that is key. What is the dormant base demand that you have, and is there a recovery there?
Yeah, thanks, Tamanna, for having me. And I'll just add to what, say, Vinnie said and come to relate to the question that you're asking here. So, of course, see, auto as a sector, I would say that had been anyways under a lot of pressure for the last 18 months, 20 months since the onset of COVID. And as one of my friends said, that the auto sector has seen 4 C's already. The first C being obviously COVID, the second C being in form of container shortages that we saw.
Yeah.
The third C was in terms of chip shortage. The fourth C was in terms of commodity price rise, which started maybe about 6 months back, I would say. But the fifth C is another big uncertainty, which is in the form of conflict that we are seeing now. And coming to, if you are saying, Tamanna, are we seeing coming back to the base demand or the base numbers? It's nowhere close to that. So if you look at two-wheelers, I think we used to do about 21 million units. That was about 3 years back. We are still significantly away from that number, which is a clear indication, as we heard even from Vinkesh Gulati, that the entry-level market somewhere has not got or has not yet revived. That's the reason why it is impacting both the two-wheelers at entry level as well as the passenger vehicles. If I look at even passenger vehicles, and this is not just India, so even if I look at passenger vehicles globally, our expectation is that the number that we had globally, which was say about 80, 85, 90 million units, we are likely to see that number only in FY23, FY24 globally. So India is no different in that sense. Even in India, we are not yet very close to that base demand that we had prior to the COVID times. Same is the case in commercial vehicles as well. So across all the 3 sectors, Tamanna, while commercial vehicles numbers may look very good, but let's remember that we saw significant reduction in demand for commercial vehicles.
Yeah, it's the base effect. Absolutely, base effect.
It's the base.
Yeah.
So if you go back 3 years, the demand that we had in commercial vehicles, we are still significantly lower than that demand. In short, in the last 3 years, actually, we have lost a lot of market from an auto sector perspective. And hope we stop with this 4th C and we don't see anything beyond this, or the 5th C and we don't see anything beyond this, Tamanna.
Yeah, no more, issues that are facing up. But just a simple question about now what happens next. And Mr. Gulati, let me come to you on this. So OEMs who we've been speaking to have already hinted and are pretty clear that beyond a point, there will be more price rises, right? We will have to hike prices. There is really no other way. And customers will have to pay. Is that going to be a major dampener in your view?
So Tamanna, practically, if you talk category-wise, it will be better on this. So today, the passenger vehicle segment or the car segment is already going through a shortage period. We are seeing a lot of waiting periods of the vehicle, and every company has at least 2 or 3 models which are seeing waiting period more than 6 months. The demand is good. So post-COVID, the personal bubble or whatever you can say, but that demand, that inquiry is still continue. So any price increase in the car segment, I don't see any effect on the demand, at least for a 6 months period. I don't know post that what happens, but near term it's okay. But any price increase which happens in the other segments, which is majority, if it affects the two-wheeler, that's where the already distress is at the highest level. And if you consider, we were averaging two-wheeler on around 14 lakh plus per month pre-COVID. Today, that average has come to around 10 and 11. That's where the major distress level is. And if the two-wheelers are not selling, it means the base economy of a country or India's economy is clearly not in the right spirit. And we normally are very buoyant on our rural economy. And for the past 4 months, we have seen that is where the major distress is. Urbanists is still able to continue with their situation, the demands, the inquiry, their whole overall sentiments. But the major distress is happening in where the Bharat is, where the rural India is. So any price increase happening in the two-wheeler segment will really hurt the sentiment. The car segment, we will be able to cover up till the time the supply chain gap is there.
Yeah. Hormazd, do you think that post-COVID requirement for a bubble kind of demand will continue to be seen? And will any kind of increase in prices be absorbed? Also, one more, and I'm sorry I'm bunching in so many questions together, but I referred to it earlier. Do you think that the current situation is going to hasten the transition to EVs?
So I think, firstly, on the price issue, obviously price does have an impact. I think that's why people are hanging on to their cars longer. That's having an impact in the pre-owned car segment. There's not enough supply there as well. Because it just doesn't make sense to sell your car, because what will you get? A car that's more expensive and something you'll have to wait ages for. So it's really not a good situation right now. And as I said, the model choice is not a great time to be a car buyer. I mean, this is no more the golden age, is what I call. It's a car that become more expensive, more complex, all that sort of thing. Yes, I mean, it does hasten the need for EVs, and I'm sure we're doing that, but I don't think the consumer has a choice in that. It's what the manufacturers are bringing forward. Clearly, we know what the roadmap is for most of the manufacturers, and we don't see any big activity happening, or the first wave will not come before 24, 25. And that's going to be led by Maruti and Toyota. We've done a story on it. They're coming with, looking at a capacity or first year sale of 125,000, which includes exports. Then you've got others working. Mahindra has also announced that they are planning it. We've just also heard that MG is looking at the EV space and following the Tata Motors model of actually raising funds for a separate entity. But all this will take time. So for now, Tata Motors, and really hats off to them, they are ruling the roost. So it really depends on what they can supply. You've got smaller players like MG with the ZS EV, but again, that's quite expensive. Again, they've also got supply issues, and Hyundai has been very marginal with their products. So again, on the EV front, yes, it does hasten the need, but you just can't throw a switch and expect it to happen. It does take time, and people who started yesterday, they'll still take a couple of years to get into the market. But I think, it's actually caught the industry flat-footed. No one thought that the petrol prices shoot up so much. And, I think Tata Motors in that sense is best poised to take advantage of this. So more the petrol prices shoot up, the better it benefits companies like Tata.
Mr. Mehta, since we've been speaking so much about EVs, and I touched upon this briefly earlier, give us an idea of what this advent of EVs really means for component manufacturers. Is it good news? Is it bad news? Is the industry preparing for what many say is an inevitability?
Yeah, so Tamanna, that's a very, very interesting question. And I would say that, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, there was a lot of din and noise, and probably the component sector was very, very wary. But today, it's very interesting. Everybody seems to be quite confident of making the transition. And why I say so is that if you look at the PLI scheme on the auto and auto components, there are 90 auto components who have applied for the scheme. So that is very, very reassuring. And of course, these are the larger tier ones that I have. So also at the ACMA Executive Committee, I did a DIP6 survey to find out how ready they are. And very interestingly, 60% of the companies said that they're already ready with technology, or they have a tie-up with an international player to be a part of the EV value chain. And 40% said that they would be ready in next 2 years' time. So clearly, people sort of, the point is very well home now that you have to make the transition, okay? And yes, of course, it's not that the entire industry is going to become an EV industry, it really depends upon, of course, the total cost of ownership based on what the fuel prices are. That will determine to an extent. But given the size and given the varied consumption habits of our people, I believe these two technologies will coexist, because also the IC engines are getting better and better when it comes to emission, and the government is also pushing on the other fronts, such as safety and stuff like that, but that safety would apply to all. So also, if you look at it, what gets majorly impacted in an EV is the powertrain. It's a powertrain transition that happens, and of course other elements of lightweighting, and maybe the platform can get redesigned. But by and large, it is the powertrain, the engine, and the transmission drive and stuff like that that gets impacted first. So the rest of the industry, of course, in some sense, would not be as impacted as is the powertrain industry. But again, as I'm saying, that the industry is actually now absolutely looking at transforming, and of course you got to stay relevant, so yep. Because we also have a very large export component, and even the global markets are changing. Some countries have decided 2030, some companies are 2040. So if the export markets are also changing, you better be relevant.
Absolutely. This is a tough time to plan ahead, though, I must say, for any industry. I mean, just look at this year, 2022, a third wave, conflict within the first 3 months. We don't know what's up ahead. But thank you, everyone, for joining us today on this sector check, where we sort of got a pulse of what's happening in the auto industry. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.